All right, we should be live. I'm going to wait for some folks to let me know. Are you here? Can you let me know? Can you say hello? All right. My production assistant, aka my husband, has let me know that we are live, and I know where everybody is, but it's okay because we can get. Oh, thank you, Adria. Just so you guys know, love the core four. I think core four might be sticking. All right, now we have some folks in the house. All right, so let's do the obligatory disclaimer. The estate of Prince Rogers Nelson is not affiliated, associated, or connected with the Welcome to America virtual celebration. Please use the hashtag W2AVC for Welcome to America virtual celebration. That's why we are all here. And as you should know, I am super excited to be with who I consider my brethren. We are here together for our seventh time. I can't believe it. Since 2017 with the Sign the Times symposium. Well, it was more of a panel and screening. We called it Peach and Black at the time. And I'm just thrilled to have us all together again. I will not do the introductions, but I will be sprinkling our bios throughout our conversation. And I didn't do this last time. And I just want to get this party started by looking at this amazing packaging on the Super Deluxe. What I love about this one is the spot varnish, which is a little different. And look at that spine. And look at the gold foil. See how it shimmers and all that? So we are super excited, and I am going to reveal the core four, and we are going to switch it up this time, actually, for a change. Normally, I have a set question that I ask, and we're going to change the order, even though my grandmother said not to switch it up. And for those of you who are on Twitter, and if you were in the tweets last night, you know, Miles Marshall Lewis got it started. So we're going to start with Miles Marshall Lewis because he's already in this conversation. So what I want to ask, the kickoff question this time is, when you heard that Welcome to America was going to be released, like what were your initial expectations before, you know, getting it, listening to it, blah, blah, blah. And then how did they change once you actually listened and got your copy? So Miles Marshall Lewis, kick it off.
All right, thanks, D'Angela. Well, that's a good one. I was expecting. What was your favorite track?
I switched it up.
You switched it up. No, okay. So when I first heard that this was dropping, I was happy. I guess maybe I had mixed feelings, but the primary thing was that I was happy, and I was happy because they were getting away from those years that are sort of more canonized in Prince's canon, in terms of you know, he didn't do anything great after whatever the cutoff year might be for you. You know, maybe when he changed his name or something to the symbol. You know, at whatever point that was for you. Like I would always see Prince live because I knew that the musicianship was never going anywhere, and that he was always fantastic and had great ideas and all of that. I mean, I was like, okay, so Welcome to America 2010 is not like my favorite Prince era. However, he could surprise me. Like, you know, you never know with Prince. There's always brilliance to be found. And so I'm looking forward to hearing it, even though it's not my favorite era. I'm glad that it's not another album from the Wendy and Lisa days, you know, or thereabouts. In terms of when I heard it, I guess it was pretty much what I expected it to be. You know, I don't consider it to be. I mean, what, he has 39 albums or so. I forget the exact number anymore. It's not. It doesn't rise to even really the first half of my favorite Prince records. You know, it's not a bad record. It just sounds like, you know, Prince. He went to the studio every single day. You know, it's as if he put on his tie and he went to work, and his job was the studio. And so every single week and a half of his life produced an album, because he would do a song from start to finish. And at the end of the day, he had a song. And at the end of the week, he had 7 songs. And, you know, a week and a half, that's 10 songs. That's an album if you wanted to arrange it or sequence it the right way to make a statement. And to me, I don't know, you know, maybe the story goes that he was inspired by this thing that Cornel West said about him not being a Curtis Mayfield. And so he made this statement album. And it was, I don't know, it doesn't really, it doesn't do it for me. I don't feel it in my bones. You know, that's really what it is. I don't feel it in my bones. I feel that the musicianship is there, and the power trio thing, that's great. You know, like I said, it's not a bad album. I just don't.
I just see D'Angela shaking her head. I just have to.
I don't.
Go ahead,
I don't
sir.
feel like no, it's fine. I just don't. I don't feel like repeated listenings is really. I'm not really there with it, frankly. You know, I know I'm not alone as well, because, you know, I've read commentary here and there since it's dropped. You know, I fall in the camp of not being super impressed by it. Yeah, in terms of the packaging and how they boxed it up and all of that is beautiful. And I give props to them, and I give props to them for choosing it, because, like I said, you know, we don't have to have all those albums from the era that people pretty much don't dispute that Prince was in his zone. This came in that era of Planet Earth in 2010, and the records that would come and go, and you knew not to expect him to play any of that stuff live in 2 or 3 years' time, because it was just sort of the latest album. And okay, you know, for me, they sort of came and went during a certain period. And, you know, this record, it reminds me of those.
So we have a question in the chat, which is, wow, why are you here then? It's because, you know, when you have those friends and you just kind of put up with them and you have to like bring them along. I'm just kidding. No, you know, one thing that I love about the unit that we have here in our conversations is that we often do not agree, particularly Miles and I, but we still love each other as Prince fans, because I know that he's coming from a place of love, and also he's a critical person. And I think being critical is important. I mean, that's what I teach my students, to, you know, look at something with a little bit more nuance versus is this good or bad. So, and then sometimes, you know, people with different opinions will get you to see something differently than you otherwise would not have without having that conversation. So the diversity of opinion is really important to me. So that's the reason why Miles is here, because I actually do value his opinion, even though I do sometimes make a lot of fun about it and I don't like it, but I still.
D'Angela, are you defending me?
Yes, I'm defending you. For a change.
Theoretically.
I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
So we're gonna keep this conversation going because the Mouse has gotten too much love. So Elliott, talk to us about what was your initial expectation when you found out, you know, it was announced, and then when you got it, you know, has it changed? Where are you?
So like, I'm gonna in the opening statement that I'm gonna give, I'm gonna be right on with Miles, and then, as what usually happens, then Miles and I are going to really depart. I was super excited. I was excited because it would, you know, it's going to be a record from the 2000s that we're going to get. That's going to be in a super deluxe fashion. The estate has been really great, right? And really upping the ante in terms of the packaging, in terms of the promo, right? The promo has been fantastic. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be another opportunity for the estate to kind of build on what they've been doing. It's going to hopefully tap into a new audience. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more sort of in a second. And I think I was also just super excited because I actually fall, I think, into a smaller kind of camp that actually liked 2010 as an album. And so I was actually really curious to hear what kinds of similarities and differences I might get between Welcome to America and 2010. Because I actually, again, I know a lot of people don't like 2010. I actually don't mind it. I actually think it's pretty good. So I was like really, really curious to kind of hear an album from the same kind of era and what it might actually entail. And then lastly, right, the kind of politics around it, like what Prince might say politically, socially, topically, right? I was really, really curious to kind of get more a sense of what might actually happen there. And so in the kind of interim between the pre-order time and by the time that I actually got it, what I was really also surprised with, and this goes back to like a kind of new audience, I had folks who, you know, are friends who don't really listen to Prince or like really only know the hits. They were really curious about this album. They were reading the reviews, right? When a new single would drop from the album, they would text me, they would talk about their thoughts. And so I was really excited about what this might mean in terms of also tapping into a new fan base, getting people more interested in the 2000s era of Prince that I think if you're not Prince fan, you might not actually really appreciate or you might not actually sort of know that well. And so I was like, oh, this might actually be a really great opportunity as well. And then, of course, like I said, the promo was fantastic. And so I was super excited. And then when I got it, and I have to say, it came to my place when I was out of town. I was visiting my family in Florida. And so I was like eagerly waiting. Like, you know, I love my parents. Great. They're great people. But I was like, I can't wait to listen. And I listened to it obviously on the streaming, but I was like, I can't wait to see the packaging, to actually hold it with my hands, those kinds of things, and to actually give it a proper listen. And so when I got home, it was like literally the first thing that I like did. I dropped off my bags and I started listening to it. And I was super, super excited. I was really amazed with the kind of sound quality of it, the kind of instrumentation. You know, I think the trio of not only Prince and Tall and Coleman, but also and Chris Coleman, but also thinking about Shelby J and really Lisa and Liv. I was like, this is really, really, this is tight. Like, and that might be the word that I'll describe it. It's a tight album, like tightly packaged, tightly put together. Really, I think well thought out. Almost really well thought out. Fully. I have some small issues with it, but I was like, this is actually really, really great. And I also appreciated in a kind of prophetic way about how it still felt relevant. And I think there's some sort of ways that Prince might have approached the album politically to make it actually have a timeless feel, right? There's a way in which Welcome to America, the way that Prince, you know, wrote as a kind of lyricist doesn't necessarily fall into, I'm going to signpost certain kinds of political events, right? We don't get the kind of Ronnie talk to Russia. We don't get the kind of reference to sort of Challenger or AIDS, right? We don't get those kind of political flashpoints in Welcome to America. Rather, we get a kind of constant interrogation of this really, you know, complicated place that we call America, right? And that kind of constant interrogation, the constant questioning that happens in Prince is still relevant to today, right? And I think that kind of approach, not necessarily using flashpoints, not necessarily using specific kinds of cultural events, but rather opening it up to kind of saying that America has always been a place that we should constantly question, is something that I think is really important. So I'll stop there.
All right. Anil, what about you? What were your expectations and how do you find reality?
That's great. I mean, I think, as always, Miles, Elliott, everybody's got a lot of the high-level context, and I agree with a lot of it. I think a couple of things. I think the first is, like, there's sort of two answers to all of this. The first is, what is this in Prince's career, in his catalog in the moment? And then there is, what is this release doing in his legacy at this moment, right? I think I sort of have two answers on that. I'm not going to, I don't think he's, hey, your top 10 Prince albums, and this is the one that jumps into it. I actually don't think there's really that much of a debate about that. The question is about, like, what was this album to him in the moment, right? And Welcome to America, just even the name, that tour meant a lot to me. Those were some of the last, like, real big shows of his I saw. I just have a lot of really personal connections. Actually, one of the last New York shows was the night my son was born, and everybody was sort of texting me, like, he kicked Kim Kardashian off the stage and all that. So like that name of the tour and that logo and all that is just very, very evocative to me. And also I felt like he was in a moment in his career when he was coming into strengths of knowing what he was in the world as one of the greats, undisputable, right? And I think that was sort of, post whatever milestone you want to point out, Super Bowl, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, whatever. This was sort of the valedictory moment of that. And so the tour really informs a lot of my opinion about the record. I also, it's funny because I look back and if I look at the track list of 2010, I'm like, oh yeah, I like that song. But my impression of it is like, I never loved the pastel cover art. That wasn't really the album for me. Like I didn't get the impression like this is the album I loved, even though there's songs on it that I really liked. And so I was a little sort of skeptical. But in the context of it, like I think it like 1,000 Light Years from Here, when that was the coda on Black Muse, I liked it, but I was like, I did want more. And then here it delivers. I felt like it was the whole thing. And so that same is true of like a couple of these songs where, half-assedly out on Facebook or on SoundCloud or whatever at the time. And they would be like kind of low resolution, whatever, like they're sort of, or barely released. You didn't know they were there. And so a lot of those sort of coming to Fulmination, sounding right, being the whole track, being produced. That was really nice. I mean, I thought it was really good. And I think actually contextualization helped. I think in particularly like a track like Hot Summer on its own. Yeah, I was like, okay, this is one of those, like just one of these tracks that he turns out. In the album context, I liked it a lot. It was got upgraded by that. And I hadn't even thought about that. Actually, I want to shout out Michael Dean, a long time, one of our sort of anchors of the Prince community and the podcast community. And, he sort of articulated that on his podcast. And that was one of the things I was like, yeah, that's what happened. That helped me realize what was there. So that's the sort of answer in the Prince context where I'm like, this is work. I like a lot of these songs. I didn't hear anything where I was like, I didn't know Prince could do that. Right. And the last time I had felt that way before this, in the timeline of when this came out in the 2010, 2011 era was like when Black Sweat came out. I was like, man, he opened my ears again. Like he gave me the thing that sat me on my ass. Where I'm like, nothing sounds like this and nobody's doing this. And he's going to, and people are going to lift off of this again. Like that was sort of that moment. I don't have a thing. This is because it's so reverent towards whether you want to point at, obviously Curtis Mayfield's mentioned a lot. P-Funk's been mentioned a lot. I hear a lot of Sam Cooke in this. When you point at those folks, I think it's a loving homage to them, but I think like we always knew, all respect to Dr. West, but we always knew Prince could do that. I mean, any of us who'd seen him, we're like, he's got that in his back pocket all day long. And it's just when he feels like doing it, he can do it. And to that point he did. So I don't think there was a, Prince opening up the sound of popular music into something it couldn't have been before he made it what it was. It's not what he did on this record and not even what he aspired to do on this record. And the last thing I'll say is on the, what this release is in the current context as a legacy artist or however you want to frame it. They nailed it. I mean, it's astounding to see even, and I don't, we don't care about charts, except everybody does care about charts whenever they want to cite them, right? And to see him in between Billie Eilish and, whoever you want to point at, contemporary artists. And it's funny because you see like, BTS fans on social media being like, is that our Prince? Because they got your K-pop artist that uses the name Prince, right? And they're like, no, this is the real Prince, and to see 13, 14-year-olds talking about, oh, let me go check this guy out. Like, I'm not trying to win over teenagers. That's not my job. That I think the estate does have to care about, or, this sort of stewards of his legacy have to care about keeping him relevant and seeming like not a current artist, but like, pertinent artist. And they killed it on that. I mean, the release, I think the physical aspects of the release look like $1 million. Again, it's funny, when you get a ticket stub and a backstage pass and whatever. It's funny because like the memorabilia, you go on eBay or something, that's going to be from the Parade tour. It's going to be from the Purple Rain tour. I don't think there was a secondary market about backstage passes to Welcome to America tour. But to treat it with that respect, I think is a statement. And I look at the care of all of the ancillary stuff, not just the packaging, but the promotion, the framing. I mean, they were on every morning show. They're doing 60 Minutes. They're doing, the podcast is really good. Like all that stuff is really good. I thought it's just so much love and respect. And there isn't, you point at the other legacy artists of his stature, even current artists. I mean, Madonna's still around, right? And she's doing a Renew record deal and she's back with Warner's or whatever. And they're not doing this job. I mean, I think they're going to use this as the template for when they re-release Like a Prayer, when they release, she's got, I don't know what her vault looks like, but you know, when they go back and put out those tracks, that part, that actually spoke to me as much, not lyrically as the music, but in terms of like the release. I loved the idea of like taking a non-revolution album seriously, taking this era seriously, respecting what it meant to him in that moment, because he was very clear. And then the last thing I'll sort of say, everybody talks about the lyrics on this album. They're dead on right. I actually disagree a little bit with Elliott. You're talking about, oh, you know, he was real specific before and this is a little broader. I'm like, you're 30 seconds in, you're calling out Viacom by name. He never did that. You didn't talk about the real world on Prince records. Even when he talks, he never says Challenger, right? It's like the rocket ship blows up, right? This is like, he's like name and date. He's like Google, iPad, iPod, iPhone. You know what I mean? I'm like, there's no ambiguity. And that's such an unusual thing for him, because he would be like, you know, the big corporate man wants a bailout, right? But he wasn't listing, you know, actual corporations by name. I think that was a move, man. That was bold. And again, that matched what he was, where I started on the stage, right? Because he was saying the same when he would be, you know, real music by real musicians, all the refrains that he went to, but he would talk about, are you listening to what Viacom programs do you to listen, or what Clear Channel tells you to listen to? Or are you doing this thing? I think the idea of him capturing that in the studio and on record, and not just banter between tracks and not just hyping a crowd up, but actually saying, I'm going to call you out for the record, on the record, check the record. Like I love it.
Thanks so much, Anil. A couple of things before we get to Zaheer that I just want to touch on. One, the Michael Dean review of this record is a must listen. I agreed with almost everything they talked about, and it was like just reaffirming to hear that they heard everything that I heard. I hear, you know, Al Green and When She Comes. I was like, and they heard it too. You know, I hear P-Funk when I listen to Welcome to America, and they heard it too. And so it was just like so affirming. And, you know, they're always hilarious as well. The other thing I want to say is I want to give massive thanks to Neil for really representing us and also representing Prince on the official Prince podcast. He did a phenomenal job. I'm really bad with numbers. I think you're on episode 3, if I'm correct. And so I just wanted to say publicly how amazing I thought that was. And actually, one of the ways that I was able to frame Prince for the very first Sign of Times event that we did at an engineering school was to say Prince was an engineer. He was technology focused. He was on the cutting edge. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to kind of pull that off. You know, he's more than just a musician. I'll never forget when I was going to Dr. Kirsty Fairclough's conference, Purple Rain, and I was stopped, you know, in the airport, and they ask you, you know, like, what is your business here? And I said, I'm here for a Prince conference. And the guy was like, what Prince? I was like, Prince the musician? He was like, the pop star? And I was like, I wanted to say, no, he's not a pop star. He's like, I would, but I was like, yes, the pop star. So I just, you know, I think it's just so great that we can be here and show all dimensions of who Prince was. And I'll stop because I want to hear what Zaheer has.
I want to tag on that and on it real quick. I know we can talk about the whole technology thing and all that. I just want to sort of say, I was very honored to get to be on that. I mean this in the most sincere and true way. I got to do that and have the context and the thought to do that because of you all. I mean, you all are the academics and the experts, and the, you know, you have studied this and researched this. I was very, very, you all were the reason I felt like I could do it. And I mean that so sincerely. Like, I just think the thought and the discourse and the, you know, the back and forth, the conversations we've been having for years sort of informed that. So I hope you all felt like I acquitted you all well.
Yes, you were representing, Anil. I was so proud. So thank you so much. All right, Zaheer, I can't wait to hear. What were you expecting and what did you get?
You know, well, so much, I agree with so much that it's been said, asterisk, except Miles. No, I even agree with some of what Miles has said too. I was excited. You know, I was excited to get a more recent project. I was excited to get an album that we didn't know existed as an album with song titles, you know, because I don't follow the bootleg circuit. But even amongst the bootleg circuit, there were songs on here that people hadn't been familiar with or hadn't heard. Or like Anil said, some snips and clippings. So yeah, I remember hearing Same Page Different Book on like a YouTube stream, like it was a Third Eye Girl stream. I was like, oh no, I was not a fan of Hot Summer when it was sent to The Current. I was just like, oh no. So I was apprehensive. I was excited when I saw the packaging. I think I ordered one of every kind of iteration of this, the deluxe, the gold pressing, the translucent pressing. Like I just, because I was like, this is amazing packaging. But I was apprehensive about the music because the two songs that I had heard were just not songs that excited me. 1,000 Light Years from Here, I had some promise because of hearing it with Black Muse, but still, I liked Black Muse a lot. I don't know. I was just like, I don't know where 1,000 Light Years from Here is going to go. And so I was just not, I was concerned, but I'm all down for everything Prince. So I was just like, I took the plunge, and then I read the reviews, and I thought the reviews, the critical reviews, the professional reviews were just, just over the, I think over the top. Like people were just so overwhelmingly positive, and I just knew that this was a marketing success, right? Like we all know that there is a correlation between a marketing push and the kind of reviews that you get. So I was excited. I was glad to see it happening. I was glad to see the machinery working for Prince in this instance. I was also glad to see Black labor highlighted in this project, especially with Morris Hayes and Shelby doing a lot of the promo. Once I got the album and listened to it, and first of all, I'm glad I got the vinyl because this really has to be listened to on vinyl. It is such a warm. It's such a warm sounding album. And I think Elliott talked about this a little bit. I mean, Chris Coleman's drumming is so warm. Like I like the way that you hear the slight reverb of the beat just makes you feel so live. And Tal's bass is in the pocket. So this trio really worked for this album, and then conceptually, and I think Elliott talked about this too, is very cohesive. It is a very, very cohesive album. Everything seems to fit in place. The sequencing works. Prince goes deep. He knows when to pull back and go light. He really does pacing really well, as we know he does. And then finally, the lyrics, which I know we'll probably get more into this, but I thought about Prince's last televised appearance in the United States and probably in the world was on the Grammy stage in 2015, where he said, like, books and Black Lives albums matter. And this album very much speaks to all of that, to books, certainly to Black lives, and certainly to the importance of an album. I do think that, and I think Elliott nodded to this too, Prince has been challenging the notion of, Prince has been a geographer, right? Like he was a technologist, but he was also a geographer. He's someone who has both made place, critiqued place. He is not just a producer of music, he's a producer of space. We know that he has crafted imagined boundaries and imagined geographies in places like Uptown, Paisley Park, but he's also critiqued notions of real place, and his concern about America as a nation, and his concern about nationalism in general is something that has been a constant thread in his music from Party Up all the way forward. And this is certainly not the first project by Prince, first song by Prince that has the word America in it. And so I think of it in the context of his of 1985's America. And it's certainly not political, but it's the most explicit. And I just, in terms of historical context, I think it's important to situate this album in the context of Barack Obama's presidency in 2010, in the lead up to the midterm elections, which saw a resounding racist reaction to Obama's presidency that year with the rise of the Tea Party. Like, you cannot listen to this album without thinking about what that meant to be observing what was happening in the country at that time. And I think Prince was trying to find a way to not just critique, but transcend and offer a transformative vision of what a future could look like. And I think that's really important. And so I move away. I mean, and so there are tracks that I and so listening to it, you know, I talked about the professional critics seemed really impressed with it. The people who are like critics that I really, really trust are among the fan community, and it was split, right? And so I was a little concerned going in, but I really enjoyed this album. It is an album that I will play frequently. And I think for all of those reasons that I stated, but finally, I think it's, you know, and I don't know what to make of this, because this isn't avant-garde Prince. Like, this isn't Prince on the edge. This isn't Prince breaking new ground. But I do think this is Prince consolidating his intellectual voice, his voice as a thinker, his voice as someone who is self-reflecting. This is an essay by Prince. This is Prince's version of what you would find in the New York Review of Books or the Paris Review or the New Yorker. This is his way of processing the world. This is Prince doing Between the World and Me. This is Prince doing his musical version of what Ta-Nehisi Coates would later do. And I think, and I know I'm not overblowing this, I'm being very serious. This is Prince as an essayist. In musical form. And I think it's really important. I know that for many of us, we come to Prince thinking, you know, about the music, and we want to thinking about the quality of the music. And I'm not saying that the quality is bad, but I am asking for us to expand our understanding of who Prince was as a 360-degree person, a multidimensional, not just musician, not just artist, but an intellect. And I think it really comes through in this album.
All right. So much to say, but you know, the 90 minutes are going to fly by. I do want to comment on a couple of things that you said, Zaheer, that I want to sort of reinforce. I really tried very hard to not listen to the songs before I got the album. There was something inside of me that said, this is an album, and you need to wait. Obviously, I couldn't get away from Welcome to America. It was just in too many different places. And unfortunately, I was in the car on the Sirius FM channel when Born to Die came on. But when I heard Zach of DMSR talk about Hot Summer, I knew I shouldn't listen to that. So I didn't listen to it as a standalone. I sort of waited for the album. But what I did was I actually listened to it with headphones, open back headphones. I'm from the School of Audio Snobs by Mark Wiggins. I get all of my audio snobbery from Mark Wiggins of the podcast on Prince. I got the right headphones, and I am so, I don't want to listen to it any other way but on vinyl with a proper system. When I listen to it, even on my iPhone or on my laptop, it just does not sound the same. It's like a totally different record. And if you haven't had the opportunity to really listen to this on a proper sound system, ideally vinyl if you can, it is a totally different experience. I cannot stress that enough, to the point where I actually don't want to listen to it unless I can listen to it that way. And also, for me, it's almost like Love Sexy, in that it's like a complete and a whole vision that I don't want to hear the tracks separately. I kind of want to hear the whole thing when I listen to it. Now, Anil made a comment that I actually wanted to say, actually, it might be me. I'm thinking this might actually penetrate my top 10. And I am actually surprised because of a comment that Zaheer said, and I totally agree. This is not the Prince I love. I love avant-garde, experimental quirky Prince. This is far from that. But what I really appreciate on this album is the musicianship. You can tell that, you know, I remember when I saw Musicology for the first time, I called my friend Jason Orr and I was like, did you think Prince's guitar playing could ever get any better? He has leveled up. Like, how is it possible for Prince to level up? And I feel like on this album, with the caliber of musicians, and also I love me a Prince power trio. Love the Prince power trios. This is one. And then obviously we have Sonny T and Michael B as another. I've always wanted him to release a power trio album. Obviously we can talk about something else, but we won't, because I'm not even going to go there. For me, this is a really fantastic trio. One of the things I wish was included was the original instrumentals with just the power trio without the vocals. I would have loved to hear that as like a deluxe, super deluxe version or something like that. I think it would have been incredible. But one of the reasons why, I'm going to stop because I can go on. One of the reasons why Controversy is my favorite Prince album is because of the engineering and how clear that album is. It is recorded, it's like very, very well. I'm just talking about the audio quality. Forget the songs, just the audio quality. The audio quality of this album is impeccable. I personally hear every single note, and also you got to give it up for the ladies with the background vocals with the trio. Like, they are incredible together. It's so complex in terms of the layers, but then you'll get something stripped down, like When She Comes, you know, which is all Prince. And so I feel like it's a more mature Prince when it comes to his musicianship. And because I enter Prince through the music, it takes me a while to really catch on, you know, to some of the lyrics. I've always entered Prince through music. I have to like live with the music first before I can actually enter into the lyrics. And I'm still living with the music because I think it's incredible. So I'm going to stop. All right. So the next question is, and the time is going to fly by when we're talking. I actually kind of don't want to ask this question because it's going to take away time from other stuff that we could be talking about, but I think it's really important. So Zaheer had talked about how, for the most part, is getting a pretty positive critical reception in the press. But with some fans, it's like night and day. It seems like people either love this album or they hate this album. There doesn't really seem to be a lot in between, and the haters are really hating. Where do you think this is coming from? I'm going to kind of go in reverse. I'm going to let Zaheer kick us off because I have a strange feeling he might make the mic drop. But I'm curious. I don't understand, like, why is this happening? So
well, maybe the album sucks.
Oh. Okay, Zaheer.
That's a thought.
We didn't hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I'll start with the generous reading of this, which is, you know, to Miles' point, and I think I respect Miles as a listener. And so to hear Miles' disappointment in the music is something I have to sit with and I want to grapple with and I want to take very seriously. And I think that there are people who are disappointed listeners, and I want to be open to why they're not happy. And for me, I'm not a disappointed listener, right? So I can't articulate that on their behalf, but I do think we have put a lot on this man, you know, who released in his life 38 albums solo or something like that number, and many more through various side projects. You know, like it is. I don't know any artist, any thinker, any creative who is constantly just going to be on that edge. I just don't know that. It is, you know, I just think it's unrealistic to expect that. And I think it's hard when Prince already broke so much ground, like there's almost little ground to break. And I think Miles tweeted that line from Don't Play Me, you know, my only competition is, well, me in the past. Because unfortunately Prince becomes his listeners become, you know, as self-referential as Prince does, right? Where it's just like, I can only think about Prince in the context of Prince. And then when you do that, I think that's skewed, right? And I want to like move out of that and think about Prince in the context of other things. Like whether, you know, like does I forgot his stage name. Does Donald Glover's This Is America, is that edgier than Welcome to America? Yes. Is video more like conversation starter than, you know, what Prince conjures in his lyrics? Yes. But that's not what I think Prince is doing here. And I don't think that's the only thing fueling the disappointed listeners. So I'm just going to come out and say it. This is a Black album. This is a black ass album. And we know that a war has been raging for years, especially in the posthumous period, over how people frame and understand Prince. And it's grappling with Prince's blackness, right? And people have a difficulty with that. There's people who are still holding on to the mulatto myth of you know, Prince as a multiracial, biracial person, because they don't want to grapple with the fact that Prince was Black and he was processing the world as a Black man, as a Black artist. His historical frame of Prince is talking about the afterlife of slavery years before Michelle Alexander's the New Jim Crow, before Ava DuVernay's The 13th. Prince is very much in line with a whole tradition of Black rhetoric and in politics and in thought that understands slavery not only as a historical experience, but as a prolonged theme and framework for understanding the exploitation of Black bodies and Black labor, which he explicitly talks about in this album. Like, there is no, speculative interpretation. There's no like, well, maybe he isn't. No, he's very clear. He's using phrases like children of the slave master's children. Look, if that's not about the afterlife of slavery, and not of just the afterlife of slavery, the afterlife of the system, it's just very clear. And I think that this is causing discomfort for people. This is like when Barack Obama said Trayvon Martin could have been my son, right? This is Prince being very clear to acclaim an identification of his Blackness. And I don't think that's the only thing. Like I said, I want to be generous and say there are some disappointed listeners who are not hearing the edgy, electro pop, stuff today. That was 2010, which I liked too, Elliott. 2010 was the closest, I think, most successful recapitulation, recovery of the Minneapolis sound that Prince did. Even way better than MPLS in the Lotus Flowers set, right? The 2010, I was like, this is the Minneapolis sound. Like, Prince really nails it here. So if you want electro pop Prince, go listen to that. This is Welcome to America is something else. And so I think that to me are just some of the things that I have kind of seen in the subtext of the critique of the reception of this album.
All right, I had to take a breath after that. Okay, I'm gonna bring up Elliott. So why can you add on to what Zaheer?
Yeah, no, I mean, Realist Zaheer has already said a lot that I wanted to share. I think one of the And I think this actually speaks to both points that people might. So, okay, let me back up. People might not be that receptive to the album because the album is specific. And what I mean by that, I mean that in let's say two ways, because I know we don't have too much time. One way is specific in the sense of the way in which it's so kind of cohesive, and that it's focused, right? It's focused on a particular kind of narrative that Prince is trying to kind of tell here. And so for folks who want to break out of that, you can't, right? Prince has boxed you in. Prince is forcing you to deal and confront with what W.E.B. Du Bois calls the impossibility of America, right? And so what listeners have to be confronted with sonically and lyrically is actually being locked into that. You can't escape, right? You can't just go off into this kind of, well, let me just dance this away, right? You can't dance this away. And I think the kind of stripped downness of this album, the way in which it's put together is so specific because it's trying to tell a particular kind of narrative that you can't actually escape, right? A lot of, I think, well, not a lot of, let's say, some Prince fans, right? And this is not sort of unique to Prince fans, right? But look to music as a kind of form of sort of escapism. And I think for some, Prince can kind of allow for that. You don't get that in this album, right? There is no kind of escapism, right? You're locked in. And I think it's important to kind of to actually sort of recount that, to make that plain and clear. I also think the references that Prince is making, again, are very much sort of specific in terms of the kind of archive that Prince is drawing on here, right? So we've already talked about Al Green, we've already talked about P-Funk, we've already talked about Curtis, but I think one of the things that I found to be really interesting also about Welcome to America, and this comes out of I think sort of lyrically and grappling with the impossibility of America. And that particular sort of phrasing comes from this novel that Du Bois wrote called Dark Princess. And it's about in part about a journey of a Black man trying to make America possible, a possibility for him. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating is that it's still very much tied to spirituality in terms of Prince, in terms of Welcome to America, right? We also can't escape the spirituality here. And in that particular way, for me, this album also draws kinds of parallels to really the staple singers for me. And so even thinking about the trio of Liv and Shelby and really Elisa, I actually start to think about the staple singers as another kind of reference point for Prince, right? Who are very much creating music that is politically aware, but also well situated within sort of Black spirituality. And I see Prince making a similar kind of narrative with Welcome to America. And so again, if you don't know these references, you can't actually tap into it. It actually forces you to really reconsider in a serious way the kind of sort of genealogy of really Black music and Black politics, and how Black politics and Black expressive culture are always necessarily political. I'll stop there because I want to get to other folks.
All right, Anil, we're leaving Miles for last.
I mean, I don't know. How do I follow these two doctors? I mean, they kind of covered it all. I think there's sort of three lanes about the criticism that the album faces. I strongly second Zaheer's point about the critical reviews being good because the promo is good, right? They're like, they want to get on board with a winner and they think this album's going to be a winner. And so that's there. And then there's a criticism within the community. And there's sort of a couple lanes as to why people might be critical on this album. I think there is, and I would put Miles in this category, the good faith of just like, what do we think is musically challenging? What do we think is pushing the boundaries of what? And I think our standard for Prince is, was he doing something I didn't know he could do? Which is unfair. But he did so many times where I'm like, man, I didn't know he had that gear. I didn't know he had that lane. And so that's the sort of, like I said, the good faith criticism, whether it is musically, lyrically, whatever. I think that's actually probably the minority of criticism on the record. I think we have within the Prince fandom at large, and maybe not those of us who are enthusiastic enough to be in this conversation, but even broadly, the sort of casual Prince fans, absolutely could not reckon with his Blackness, right? And I think that was grounded in, one, the context in which non-Black fans like me found him, right? Was mediated through white media and through the ambiguity of the Purple Rain era and the PR that happened then, and all that kind of stuff about like pretending that there was a racial ambiguity in him that wasn't. His lyrics sort of, I mean, he talked about this in the faith-based context, talking about the elevator versus the devil, right? And then by the time you get to Love Sexy, it's like, this is like, you're not going to avoid the Christian text and subtext in this record. And this is the same as true here. It's like, you're not going to avoid this being centered in Blackness. And you might have found it convenient to not have to be uncomfortable about confronting that this is a Black man talking about a Black experience before, and now you're going to. And I think one of the things that jumps out is he had talked about it years earlier, but in the specifically this era, this tour, the music he's putting out this time, he's talking about things like Black Wall Street in record promo, in tour promo, right? And you still see now people are sort of saying, oh, that was, that's in an HBO series. And so now I'm discovering this history. I keep seeing on social media these things trending where people are like, I didn't know this history until Watchmen covered it or whatever. And we're 10, 20 years later past when Prince was talking about it every day. And he's doing that to promote a record, right? Like everybody else is like, oh, what's your sign? And look at my cute outfits. Like that's how they promote a record, right? And he's like, this country has tried to dismantle our community over and over, systemically, economically, personally, spiritually. And like that part of this, I think that's such a brave, and it makes it impossible to underestimate him. And that's one of the things people really, really struggle with, because there was a dismissal of, depending on the era of his career, he's just that guy that is provoking by talking about sex, by using language that we don't use on the radio right now. He's just that guy who's provoking by having his ass hanging out his pants, right? And there's this thing, there's the dismissal. And it was, frankly, people tried to act like he wasn't smart. It's as simple as that. People are like, it's coincidence that he happened to know how the record industry worked. It's accidental that he happens to be able to master all these things. It's incidental that he was a master at the business side, right? They wanted him to be song and dance man, piano man, guitar man, right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, he was already better than everybody at that. But the idea that he was also genuinely gifted and brilliant in political analysis, in economic analysis, in business acumen, and also he could be a little all over the map because he was, an artist and he was expressive and whatever, and that let people dismiss it. And I think that's actually still a thing we're reckoning with. And I think there's also, my most charitable view of this is like, we also he had different fandoms, right? And I look at, like, we've always been really lucky to have different parts of the fandoms talking about different aspects of the stories. We are reckoning within the fandom of, like, a lot of those voices were people who didn't understand his context, whether because they weren't Black, because they weren't American, because they weren't, whatever their experience, a different faith, all those different things. And, I say this, where how much I learned, like, my initial lens growing up in a very white area and very white context on, like, a Black experience was Prince's voice articulating it to me. And it was a gift. And that opened the door into understanding a lot of these things. But it could have gone the other way. It could have easily been in the context I grew up in. That's just that guy that makes some songs on the radio. And I don't want that to challenge me or to bring me into a community or to help me learn about a history that nobody else is teaching me, not the schools, not the TV, not whatever else. And so I think that's something where we're, like, still reckoning. And the funny thing is, I mean, that's what this record's about. Like, you're going to see me, you're going to hear me, you're going to know about what my life is and what I've been through and what my people have been through. And I think, that's powerful. It's one of the things I love about this. And also it is unflinching. You are not going to just, like, dance your way through. I mean, I think, D'Angelo, to your point, you're just like, oh, I'll start with the music first. And it's like, guess what? Not this time. Like, you are not going to miss it. And so I think that is a big part of the pushback or the criticism or the challenge that's there. And I think it's good because, like, that's what he wanted us to do. Like, he really wanted to have us be clear on who he was, what he was about. Were we going to push each other? Were we going to, like, love each other anyway, even if we disagree? I mean, I think that's really powerful. But that's a gift. That's a gift that he gave us. And I think I'm hoping. I still am optimistic. I think his music does have the power to get people to the other side and to see the humanity of those who people have tried to deny humanity to. I think that's still there, but I think that is what the real reckoning is. Do you believe that this man was the intellectual titan that he was, in addition to the artistic titan that he was?
All right, Miles.
Okay, I'm here. Yes. So I agree with so much that's been said, So from 2004, right, to 2011, I was living in Paris, right? When 2010 was happening, I wasn't living in America. And when I heard about Welcome to America, the tour, I was not in America, and I didn't see that tour because I wasn't here and it didn't come to Europe. What I did see was All Day, All Night, which was, like, sort of something he did in Paris, 2 shows during one day. I went to that, and at the Grand Palais, and it was amazing. But I left in 2004. I was 33 years old, and the Iraq War was about to pop off, and I think it was maybe around Valentine's Day. There was this huge worldwide protest against the war, and I was out there, and the war happened anyway. Bush did what he wanted to do, and I felt like in my sort of 33 naivete, like, okay, I don't want my tax dollars to go to bullets and bombs. I'm out of here. I don't have a car note. I don't have a mortgage. I'm leaving. And I left, and I stayed away for 7 years. I say all that to say that I am very down for the critique of this country, and I'm always down for Prince's critiques of this country. When I listened to the album, definitely there were lines that popped out to me. Transformation happens deep within, on the first record, or the first song rather, Welcome to America. He said other things. Now we have to show them what it means to be American, on a thousand light years from here. I was like, wow, like I've heard that so many times just among conversations that I've had with other Black people, like, that goes to the whole, there's probably a Twitter hashtag about Black women always being expected to save the world, like it's not our responsibility to pull you out of your shit all the time, meaning America, So there's plenty on here. Even Watch Out for the Sinister Minister, on the same page, different book. There was stuff that I liked intellectually on this record. I definitely agree with what Zaheer said. I wrote it down in my notes about the album that it's like an essay. It's like a book. It's like a book on wax, and on that level, like approaching it and critiquing it on that level, I sort of have a different feeling about the record as opposed to just, okay, this is a Prince record that I want to hear, and let's see musically and just, well, musically, but even spiritually a bit, like, how it sits with me and how much I want to return to it and how much I just genuinely love it and how much it makes the feelings rise up in me that have always, that his best work has always kind of made me feel. And that album didn't do that for me, but lyrically and in terms of what he was trying to accomplish or what he was accomplishing with the critique of America and stuff like that, I was on board with that. So it's almost like it's 2 different albums. So in terms of the critiques of the records that people have had, you love it or you hate it. I don't hate this record. I just, as the kind of experience I enjoy the most from the Prince records that I love the most, it doesn't give me that. But as a book on wax, I mean, sure, there's a lot to parse through, and I'm proud of him for having recorded it and having made certain statements. But I haven't read any negative stuff, to be honest. I read the New York Times review and I read a Pitchfork review. And I think the snarkiest thing in the Pitchfork review was maybe a quote about him saying, you think today's music will last? And they were like, Elixir hasn't. You know what I mean? Like, you're capable of music that hasn't lasted also. So, then try to blast whoever. But yeah, I mean, there are lyrics on this album that feel tossed off to me, and I'm sure people would disagree with me. But there are things like, let's say, Check the Record. Let's say, Yes. There are things on there that I just kind of feel like, well, I feel that Prince wrote this in an afternoon, which Prince was capable of writing some phenomenal things in an afternoon. So that's not necessarily a diss, but I don't know, it just doesn't do it all the way for me. And I guess a lot of people feel the way I do. But, I oscillate, I do have respect for this record on a certain level. And then just on another level where I just sort of, those records that I love, the Prince it's like, okay, he did that. I didn't really feel that. And I guess a lot of other people didn't either.
Can I ask Miles something? I'm interested, within the context of the album itself, do you have a song or a favorite song on there, or a song that comes closest to doing what you would want a Prince song to do for you?
Not really. I mean,
Well, do you have a favorite song on the album?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I anticipated what's your favorite song, and maybe I would have said, not Born to Die, but kind of.
I feel like we're doing an intervention here with my.
No, you know, maybe When She Comes. I guess a lot of people in the Prince community have said that they sort of prefer this version to the other one that came out, and you know, I guess I agree with that. You know, I'm always a sucker for a Prince ballad. When She Comes is beautiful. Maybe it's between those two. That's all.
All right. Elliott, did you want to respond to something that Miles said? I feel like you wanted to say something at one point.
I don't know if I did. I was like,
nah, I know what it was when I said his lyrics were tossed off.
Oh yeah. So because you name check the record, and I was like, So I mean, that's a song that I like. It's not my favorite, but that's I was like, that's one of my favorite songs of the album. So I felt a little personally attacked by that, but that's all right. It's par for the course, right? It's par for the course, but
sure. I mean, I felt that was one of the weaker songs for me. I felt like Hot Summer was one of the weaker songs. You know, it's interesting that he sort of predicted, you know, Hot Girl Summer in a sense, you know, in terms of Megan Thee Stallion and her making that like a big thing mad years later. But it's fine, you know. I mean, I said this on Twitter as well, that like if everything Prince does is great, then nothing Prince done is great. You know, like if the world is purple, then you can't appreciate orange because everything is purple. You know, it's like it can't all be fantastic, and I'm fine with that. You know, he did so much fantastic work, and it helps me that there are different levels, you know, to how much I enjoy different things that he puts out, and it's fine. You know, like it's fine. There's nothing I ever want to hear more than Prince. You know, this album just wasn't. I'm not gonna pretend it was that fantastic to me. It wasn't really.
Do you think it's something that might age well with you? Like maybe something you come back to?
That's possible.
I'm trying, y'all. I'm really.
I was gonna say, like that whole response, you were like, it's possible. Like you're hedging, Miles. It's.
Oh my God! Yeah. So this is what I want to say. I want to try.
I've been wrong before.
Yeah, I want to try to say it without crying. I'm getting really emotional, Miles. You're getting me really emotional. So, okay, I didn't say this. I can't remember which symposium this was, but I remember Zaheer saying that he hadn't listened to Hit and Run Phase 2, and he wanted someone to bring it to him on his deathbed. I too, Zaheer, I didn't volunteer this, have never listened to Hit and Run Phase 2. I obviously have it. Unfortunately, I had to listen to Black Muse because everybody in my was talking about that. And then obviously there's a version of When She Comes. I do prefer the version on Welcome to America. One of the things I failed to say when I was talking about it that Raka Bosch brought up, one of the reasons why I love the music so much is that it's totally acoustic. And, you know, there was a time where, you know, Prince had his Lindrum. I love totally acoustic Prince. It sort of takes me back to For You and those things. But one of the things I think is missing for me from this conversation, and the reason why I wanted to do this, having a complete album from Prince's vault since he's passed is a big freaking deal. And that it is so consistent, and in my opinion, it showcases his musicianship so superbly. He's acting as an elder statesman. He's allowing Tao and Tao in particular, like her bass playing chops are just so sublime. Some of the bass fills that she does. And I've always felt that Prince, as phenomenal of a bass player as he is, after controversy kind of de-emphasized the bass, he basically had the time take that on. And I was craving for a bass heavy album from Prince, and I got it. And I couldn't believe that it's freaking Tal Weckhamfield, who is just incredible. So I know some people don't like it as much, Miles, but I have to say, for this coming out of the vault, who knows if this is truly the complete version or not? I don't know. I mean, that's questionable. But I am grateful. I am thankful that I actually have a new Prince album that I have never heard of to listen to. And I think it's fantastic. So we don't have time for me to get emotional. We only have 27 minutes to go. And I do want to switch the conversation because I think it's really important for us to discuss this. I want to do a roll call. Well, actually, Miles has already done his roll call on where and how many times did you see the Welcome to America tour? So I want to flip it to the Welcome to America tour. Do you think that the show that they selected for the Blu-ray was the right show? So I'll kick it off by saying I saw one of the Jersey shows the second night, which was phenomenal. I'll say that in a few seconds. And I saw 3 out of the 4 Madison Square Garden shows. I saw the one where Sharon Jones and Dap Kings opened up. Rest in peace, Sharon Jones. It was incredible. And I also saw when Larry Graham opened, and then when CeeLo opened. And I remember that the Jersey show was everything. The Jersey show was everything. I felt like it was just a different feeling, particularly when it came to the encores. And I actually chased that feeling at every single Madison Square Garden show that I went to, and I never got it back. And so I was pleasantly surprised with the Blu-ray. I love that they selected this show, predominantly because Joy and Repetition, which is my favorite Prince song. I can actually name my favorite Prince song, Joy and Repetition. That's the song. And when I was in Paisley Park with Zaheer, and I was like, no, they ain't, because I didn't look at the track listing. I didn't know what was on that show. And I was like, oh my God, he's starting off a show with Joy and Repetition. This is insane. So I'm going to stop it there because I could go on. So I want to hear from Anil, which Welcome to America shows did you see? And then do you think they made the right choice in terms of the Blu-ray?
Yeah, so I saw 3 out of the 4 New York shows as well. And I had tickets to the 4th, and I think I'd mentioned that was the night my son was born. So we were in the hospital, and I was getting texts on it, and those shows were really special to me too. I mean, I think it was just sort of the last time he did that certain kind of real big show. And part of what I loved was getting texts from people every night that because so many friends, I was like, you got to go to the show. And so people at the Garden being like, texting me right after, oh, this is what you've been saying all these years. This is why you said I got to go to this. I was like, he told you got to go to the concert, And so so much of the moment is I had been evangelizing to folks. If you've never been to a Prince show, you got to go. I'll buy you tickets, And so that was it. I thought those shows were great. I mean, there were aspects that were whether it was a little bit of piano sampler stuff or the abbreviated versions of hits and medleys that were parts of those later shows I didn't always love. But the moments where everybody in the crowd in Madison Square Garden is singing along at the top of their lungs with, Purple Rain, with whatever. I mean, I think I still look back at those moments God, that feeling. I wish that, when you miss him, you miss him like he's a friend. I think it's a lot of that sort of feeling. I loved on this whole tour his selection of covers. I thought I really think he was very, very canny about opening up his audience to either artists they might not have found or as a way in for folks who didn't know him as well, And so I love the More Than This as the closer on the DVD. That's another one of those where I think that's a certain kind of audience that didn't know he has that lane and could sort of get it. On the other hand, I listened to the Englewood Swinging, and actually I think in the Prince podcast, the official podcast, they were talking about he had called up Kool and the Gang and said, can I do your song? And can I do it as Englewood? And that's really sweet. I think that's really touching. On the other hand, it's it goes on a long time and it's not that interesting. You know what I mean? I'm okay, that's cool. I two verses of Fantastic Voyage. I'm okay, that's fine. Like that, I don't think there's anybody that goes to a Prince show to hoping he's going to play that funky music, White Boy. Like, I just can't imagine who that person is. And so like that stuff is like, I know why he did it. It's like, it's entertaining in the moment and it's good crowd pleasers and gets people hyped at the end of the show and all that kind of stuff. But like that stuff was, I was surprised how much that didn't age well for me because I had such a fond memory of these shows. But the heart of it, you know, when he does whether it's Question of You and The One and Fallen as a medley that he did so much in those years, I was like, every time, I'm here for it. Like, I don't mind. And I remember at the time, the concert reviews would be like, oh, he slowed down the show for 12 minutes to do a cover of an Alicia Keys song. I'm like, you shut up. He's good. Like, we're good. Like, we're fine. We're fine. You go. You don't need you can go get a drink. But also just again, the reverence of capturing the live show, to realize, and actually this is, I think, a point to someone alluding to what Miles was saying earlier. There is nobody who could argue there was a better concert in 2010, 2011 than the Welcome to America shows. Like, there was not like, you know, I went to the shows in December of 2010. There wasn't some other show in New York in 2010, December, that you're like, that was a better show that Prince just put on. So, you know, whereas with the album, I think the contrast is, I mean, there were a lot of big artists that had been around a while that put out well-reviewed records in 2011, right? So REM had one, and I think the Beasties had put out one, and Watch the Throne was that year. And all those, I mean, actually, it's funny. I think a lot of those haven't aged very well either. I don't think anybody's like, my favorite REM album is the one that came out in 2011. I don't think anybody's favorite Beasties album is that one, but they kind of got a little bit of the legacy artist boost, and maybe the record would have done that. But live, you have this record where you have this video where you're like, nobody was touching it. And this is with, like I said, with a little bit of the material being weak and a little bit of the album that you're touring ostensibly on that's not even available. You know, like all the things that are the trappings of like making an album, a live concert great aren't there. But those shows were a party, and they had so much heart and soul. And I think that is captured there. I'm just glad to see that work treated with respect. And then, you know, the last thing I sort of say is like, there's these allusions to his own legacy in the live shows where he's talking about, I mean, obviously, like, part of what he cared about with doing those shows at the Forum was that he had seen Fleetwood Mac there when he was young, and he had played there at the beginning of his career, and he wanted to support that venue. I love that this mirrors exactly the album. This is a personal story. This is about our community. This is about support, like the economic, financial, and structural support to people who get marginalized. I mean, I thought that's there's levels to this, you know, there's always levels to this. And it's like, it's not just the set list. It is like, why are we here? Why are we playing here? Why are we covering these artists? Why are we picking who we put on stage with us or to open for us? I love that it existed at both those levels.
All right. So actually, I need to interrupt our regularly scheduled video right now because I didn't realize that Celi's wife is actually in the chat, Monica. Celi was supposed to be with us today. He's not doing he's okay, but we just want to send him love and hope that he recovers as soon as possible. He is absolutely missed today. He was supposed to moderate the next panel. So I just wanted to since she's here, I just want you to know, thank you so much for sharing him with us, because I know I take away people when it comes to the symposiums. They're usually a huge time hit. So I really do appreciate you. And please tell Celi that we absolutely love him and miss him and wish he was here with us today. So, all right, we are going to transition to Elliott. Do you mind kind of telling us like how many shows you saw, if you thought this was the right one?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's going to be quick because unfortunately, I didn't see any of the Welcome to America shows. By the time I was back in, so this is somehow a full circle moment because I was already back home in Florida by the time the December shows were there. So much like the Welcome to America album, when it came to my house here in Minneapolis and I was in Florida, much in terms of December shows, I was already back home in Florida. And by the time I came back to New York, that was the period that I was also starting my comprehensive exams folks don't know, it's like a very bleak and tough period for PhD students. And so I just couldn't go anywhere. So I missed the entire kind of tri-state sets. So that being said, I was really excited to see, the DVD of the Forum show. And it like really sort of like you, D'Angela, starting with Joy and Repetition was fantastic. I was like, this is a great opener, something I didn't really expect. And I was like, this is perfect. And I think it tied, I think they also did well for the promo in terms of the official Prince podcast to talk about the importance of the Forum, what it meant to actually perform in Inglewood. That kind of framing of it was really great. And again, I think it further boxes listeners in to deal with Prince's Blackness, to deal with the Black politics surrounding Prince and Prince's artistry and music. So like, I think that was a really good sort of decision to kind of choose that particular show. I think it worked well, not only again in terms of the promo and packaging, but I think also the kind of narrative that we've been talking about for almost the full 90 minutes and thinking about the Blackness of Prince.
I think D'Angela queued me up. She was on mute, but it's interesting. I have the opposite feeling about the live DVD than I do about the album, where the narrative of the album for me is what drew me and draws me to the album. The narrative of the story around the performance at the Forum and the residency at the Forum are not enough for me to appreciate the concert as a whole. I went to all of the New Jersey and all of the Madison Square Garden shows, and I, out of bias, wish that one of the Madison Square Garden shows was featured for two reasons largely. One, it is at one of those shows where he actually performed the song "Welcome to America" as part of a medley with Dreamer on Martin Luther King Day, right? Like, and so the narrative would hold in terms of the importance of that song, and even having a song from the actual album, or an actual song from the album performed live very differently. It was not a jazzed out version. It was guitar driven rock, and it showcased his ability, because in fact, that was the only version of Welcome to America I'd ever heard. And so when I actually heard the song that was on the album, I was like, holy shit, this is completely different. And it showcases his ability to flip his own songs so well. So I wish that had been featured. The other thing that I wish one of the shows from New Jersey or the Garden in particular is that they were more Prince concerts. I feel like the shows, by the time we get the show at the Forum, it's a residency. It has become more of the after show vibe with the heavy covers, with the reliance on the vocalists in the band. There's not an emphasis on Prince's own music. This is Prince's stretching out, which is a different kind of Prince, right? And also that particular night wasn't sold out. So there's a different kind of energy in the audience, whereas the Garden shows were like packed to the hilt, right? And it's like a New York crowd. And yes, all the critics do love you in New York. It was live. But that said, I really like that this tour received a DVD release, because this was our first experience. So he had done the musicology show in the round, right? And which is something he began to appreciate. And this was our first time seeing the cymbal stage, a scaled down version, right? Than what was introduced to us at the Super Bowl, right? And that cymbal stage was just amazing. The lighting design for this show was incredible. The synchronization of the LED lights around framing the cymbal with his dancing with the musical hits, with the horn hits, with all of that, just the synchronization of the lighting was incredible. I thought that in the New York shows, his dance interlude for Kiss was much more impressive than what we see in that Forum DVD. And there'd been so much talk, and I think in retrospect, like there's a larger context to this, but there's so much talk about how Prince sort of stopped dancing because of the speculation around his health at the time. And to see him, and I don't know if this was before or after he got that surgery, but to see him do that, and he wasn't doing splits, but he was doing this sort of like pop, this sort of robot pop locking, like this really effective dance number that was, and he was in this all red glitter suit, and the stage was lit red. I mean, it was a really powerful presentation that we saw, and I don't feel like the version that we got on the Forum DVD gave us that same kind of magic. The Beautiful Ones was a much more moving presentation in the garden shows that included Misty Copeland, which also talks about just part of that narrative of Prince's support of Black artists. And so I feel like the narrative could have been accomplished that way. That said, the sound of this DVD is, I mean, I keep saying DVD, Blu-ray. The sound of this video is incredible. And so I was lucky with D'Angela to sit in the Paisley Park soundstage and see this for the first time. And the sound was just the bomb. And the opening, I also hadn't read the set list. And the opening of Joy and I didn't know it was Joy and Repetition for a while, just because of the way he sort of walks into that, and then goes into this amazing version of 17 Days. I'm as much as I wish the garden shows were featured, the fact that those two, we had not seen that at the garden shows, so like that alone makes the Forum video a prize for me. And then finally the playfulness, the part where the woman touches his boot and he's like, I'm trying to work here, like that, just the humor and good naturedness. This is not the nasty person who has security drag you off stage. This is a playful Prince that shows that he actually he's loving what he's doing. He loves the fans. He had a really special relationship with his audience, and it comes through really live and in person. And then finally, I would have liked to see, and I know that there are licensing issues, but some of the opening acts for this show were really incredible. I saw, there was Larry Graham, which would have been easy, I think, to license, but the CeeLo at the Garden, Prince did this amazing guitar solo for Crazy, which was just moving. Janelle Monáe opened up another night. Sharon Jones, who did this really, really joyful duet with him for A Love Bazaar at the Garden, which I think was really precious. I think at New Jersey was Cassandra Wilson, and if I'm not mistaken, Esperanza Spalding, I think, were the two. But and I know D'Angela is probably itching to say this, but the piece de resistance of the New Jersey show was when the lights went on, people were leaving, and Sheila E. came out, and you could have heard me screaming at the top of my lungs from the nosebleed seats to see Sheila and Prince. And then he did this amazing encore of Adore. I feel like that was like the Black show. Like that New Jersey show was like the blackest of the shows because of the choice of song selections and the nods. And I know there was something very Jersey about it in that respect. When you think of like, the Warehouse, it was just a Jersey. It was like a Jersey show. So, but I'm still appreciative of the video that was released because the sound quality was amazing. And really even though the crowd wasn't a sold out crowd, the balance in the sound mixing between what's going on stage and what you can hear in terms of the audience response is sometimes not that great. And I think it was good in this show because you really get to feel the audience with you in a way that sometimes you don't in some of his other video releases.
So we only have like 9 minutes left, but I do want to say a couple things. One, I had to get to Paisley Park to listen to, when I heard they were going to be showing that on Paisley Park sound system, which is incredible. I was like, COVID, because I had never been inside any social event, but I went to Paisley Park and I was like, if I'm going to catch COVID, I'm going to catch it in Paisley Park because I got to see and hear this on this screen. So that was really important. And I want to give a massive shout out to Paisley Park for actually doing that. To say whoever was involved, whoever made that decision, that was a freaking good decision. The only thing that I did not like is I thought that we were going to have a proper listening party. And I really wish that it would have been in the main sound stage, not in the MPG club, because we were kind of packed in there. I was uncomfortable. I kept my mask on. I know Zaheer left because it was too COVIDy up in there for him, and I don't blame him. But, you know, I thought that was like really, really important. Another thing, though, even without being at Paisley Park, as Zaheer said, the sound is incredible. And so whenever we do these things, you know, I always want more. So this is what I want. I want a box set. You can either give me all the 21 shows in audio, or you can give me the New Jersey / MSG shows in audio, or give me the whole freaking tour on audio. So I talked about this. Dwayne and I, we did a Grown Folks Music podcast 2 or 3 weeks ago for his book. And in that, I actually talked about Lee Morgan. They're about to release a Lee Morgan box set where he played live at the Lighthouse. They are releasing all 12 sets from the Lighthouse for Lee Morgan. So, and I love Lee Morgan. He's one of my favorites. I ordered the box set. So if they would do something similar for Prince, I would be incredibly happy, because like one of the things that's interesting about this tour is that it basically meandered a lot, like in terms of the set list. I mean, obviously there are some core songs that were played a lot, and you'll probably get tired of listening to them if you did have every single one and you listen to them all the time. But when you had certain anomalies, you know, like starting the set off with joint repetition, I love that he started the actual concert in the dark. I mean, I thought that was incredible. And I also really appreciate, and because I know Dwayne edited the video, that he kept, you know, the darkness, you know, because they could have had some sort of video, a photo montage or something like that. I'm so happy they just left it alone so we could really experience. I can't remember who said that, like, this is the first time we kind of feel like we're in a concert. And that's so important because we can't see Prince anymore in concert. So I personally really love this particular show more than I thought. I do hear you, though, Zaheer, in terms of this isn't necessarily a Prince show. It's more like an after show. But at the same time, I love the after shows, you know. So that's one of the reasons why I thought this was a really great selection. I just really wish it was kind of similar to the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe, where we got a video and then we got an audio of another show. Because one thing I wanted to mention is, you know, on the Welcome to America 45, there is that version of Dreamer going into Welcome to America. It's not from MSG, but it's from the May 14th LA Forum show. And if you don't have this and you haven't heard this, it's incredible. So I was like, I want the full show, you know, after, you know, hearing that little small snippet. So, okay, I'm going on and on with my rant of more. All right, so we are down to 4 minutes. Is there anything we want to say that we have not said about either the tour, the album, the podcast, which was incredible? Thank you, Andrea Swinson, particularly for Dr. Corey West. That would be like, thank you so much. And also Mr. Anil Dash, having him on there was like really phenomenal, and exposing the masses to Prince as a technologist. I really, really appreciated that the estate did that. So, Miles.
Yeah. So July 2010, I mentioned that I saw Prince in Paris at the Grand Palais. It was all day, all night. It was called All Day, All Night. But I also went to an after show, which was not an after show because he didn't do a before show. He just did this show at New Morning at 2 o'clock in the morning. I saw Erykah Badu at Olympia, and I heard rumblings that Prince is going to be somewhere else that night. So I went. Like, their capacity, New Morning capacity is like 200 people. It was a great show. It was that same era. I have a set list here because I wrote about it on my blog. But he started with Stratus, Billy Cobham. He did Brown Skin. He did I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. I mean, he didn't do it. It was like Shelby J or whatever. Baby Love was on there, but he was doing stuff like When Will We Be Paid? He did Little K Sarah Sarah, Sly Stone version, obviously. That was the Shake Your Body Down to the Ground era where it was like he was starting to do that live. He did Purple Music that night. He played like from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was just the 200 of us in there. And in college, I'd come up with this bootleg with him at New Morning in '88. And I had my iPhone on me. I was like, oh shit, this is like, it's a full circle moment. I could make a bootleg with my phone and record this, and it was like, that's deep or whatever. This is serendipity. And my iPhone died. So that was an amazing show, though, and he was never less than at the peak of his powers live, and I was really glad to see it. And it was an intimate kind of a thing. And Welcome to America didn't come to Europe, so I'm glad I caught him doing 4 hours of just bananas shit.
Yes, I am so jealous of you for Purple Music alone, which is one of my absolute favorites. Is there any final words?
I too am jealous. I always dreamt of wanting to see Prince in a European venue, in particular in a Parisian venue, just because he always seemed to go there with stuff like Purple Music being an example, and just never got that chance. So I'm very jealous of you, Miles.
I think we all are. I mean, that's living the dream. Well, never mind. Okay, I'm going to continue. So thank you so much, each and every one of you. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves. It's always a pleasure to have the conversation about Prince with you. I hope those of you who are in the audience also had a great time. There's a request. So these are my Welcome to America sleeves that I got from the Welcome to America tour in Madison Square Garden. There was a request for me to show them. So I used to wear these every June 7th on Prince's birthday, even when he was alive. I know he never celebrated his birthday, but I always did. So I would be walking through New York with Prince on my arms and just letting everybody know that today was Prince's birthday, even if he didn't want anybody to know. Okay, so we're gonna take a break. We're gonna take a 30-minute break. You need to get in your water. You need to get in your exercise. You need to do yoga. You need to open your mind, because this next panel, like if your feelings are easily hurt, please do not come to the next panel, because it is going to be an interesting and incendiary conversation that is moderated by none other than Scott Woods. Originally, it was supposed to be Seeley, and I am so sad. I am like really sad that he can't make it, but he can't make it. He really wanted to be here. So I said, well, Seeley can't do it. Who else can we bring? I miss Seeley because I'm a Southerner. Seeley is a Southerner. I was born and raised in Alabama. He's in Mississippi. And we have something called the Southern Revival in church, where you just get rejuvenated. And Seeley does that for me every single time. And so I really, really miss him. But Scott Woods is going to take over moderating. We have Nicolay in the house. That's all I got to say. Mic drop. We got Harold Pride. Also, mic drop. We got Arthur Turnbull. Also, mic drop. We got Ricky Wyatt. Also, mic drop. So basically, get arrested because it's going to be on. And I can't wait to hear what they're going to be talking about. So come back at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Standards Daytime, whatever it's called, New York City time, and be ready for a conversation out of this world. Thank you for being here.